In 2009, peace came to Sri Lanka after 26 years of civil war. Government troops had crushed the Tamil Tigers, a guerrilla force which had waged a brutal insurgency seeking self-rule for the Tamils, a minority making up about 12% of Sri Lanka's population, mainly living here in the north. Peace has brought stability. Tourists are again flocking to Sri Lanka's golden beaches and investment is flowing. But as security services keep a tight rein on the Tamil community, that peace is coming at a terrible price for some.
People today are living in the midst of fear. People are still being abducted. People are still disappearing.
When she sleeps at night, she'll ask for her father and cry. I'm in a situation where I can't give her answers. Blood was pouring out of his feet. It was coming from his toenails.
Sri Lanka's long-running civil war against Tamil separatists ended 4 years ago. But there are claims that persecution, torture, abductions and even rape are being used against the Tamil community today, and that the repression is spreading with a crackdown on all dissenting voices. I'm Evan Williams. On this edition of 101 East, we investigate Sri Lanka's current human rights record. In November, Sri Lanka's President Mahinda Rajapaksa hosted the biennial Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting known as CHOGM.
Sri Lanka is deeply honoured to host this event. I'm extremely thankful to all of you.
It was meant to be a celebration of the Commonwealth's colourful diversity and each nation's adherence to a new charter upholding democracy and the rule of law. But throughout the conference, the President was pressed to answer claims that thousands of civilian Tamils had been killed in the dying days of the war.
Every day for the last 30 years, people were dying, youth were dying. So we have stopped it. If there are any allegations against anybody, I said last time that we are ready to inquire into it.
Meanwhile, across town, hundreds of Tamils had gathered to try and use CHOGM to get answers from the government on thousands of relatives they say went missing during and after the war. The meeting was not welcomed by some. Outside the hall, angry crowds from the majority Sinhalese population had gathered. They were here to show support for the way President Rajapaksa had beaten the Tigers and crushed what was widely seen as a terrorist organisation. They were stopping people entering and even attacked the main opposition party leader's car. But this wasn't the only disruption. In the nation's north, 3 busloads of Tamils with missing relatives had been stopped from travelling to the meeting. The buses had been organised by a Tamil city councillor in the north, ANANTHI SASITHARAN.
The police came. They threatened the driver and the passengers and held them for a while. They were crying, "We can't even hold a protest in peace for the children we've lost."
ANANTHI has a personal reason to search for the missing. Her husband Eelam was a political officer with the Tigers. She was with him in the north as government troops moved in on the Tigers' last stand.
It was about 7 in the morning. My children and I went with my husband as he went to surrender. Someone from the army turned up. They pushed me away and said, "You go to your line. We will release Eelam."
Eelam was not released and she has never seen him again.
I handed him over to the government because I trusted them. We believe they still have him. If not, the government has to admit they killed those who surrendered and should accept their punishment.
The government says it detained about 12,000 Tamils and that most have been released. But Tamil groups insist thousands of those arrested and detained since are still unaccounted for. Yet, even years after the war, some of those who have been released are still dealing with devastating consequences of being held in the detention camps.
I met 2 women recently who'd been imprisoned as former fighters. They were in such a devastating condition. They were depressed and spoke openly about how they'd been raped.
Some, like this woman, claim the use of sexual violence has not been restricted to the camps. She's a former Tamil fighter. For years after her release, she says she was repeatedly called in by police and soldiers for inquiries, threatening her with jail if she refused.
At first, they would start to push with their feet. Then they would embrace me, kiss me, and lift my clothes. Then they would pull me and shove me to the wall. They would leave me standing at the wall. They would hold me there and lift my clothes.
She claims this happened every few days for 2 years, and that they even molested her at home. 6 months ago, she fled, sleeping rough until finding shelter.
I've not been home ever since. I can't go home. I can't go to the hospital. What shall I do? Where can I go? I can't get treatment. There are soldiers everywhere in the hospital. Everywhere you look, the army is there. I feel threatened all the time. That's why I carry these tablets with me, so I can take them and die if something happens.
A government official working with rape victims agreed to see us if we didn't reveal his identity. He showed us an interview he'd recently recorded with this Tamil woman, a widow and mother of 2. Living in an isolated village, she told him she'd been raped repeatedly. She was medically verified as now pregnant.
They want to terminate the pregnancy.
She wants to terminate.
Yeah.
Why?
Because the army people they have to get this lady. That's the reason. This is the unwanted pregnancy.
So the army people,
Yeah.
soldiers raped her.
Yeah. So
And when did this happen?
this year I do not remember in the date.
This year?
This,
He says she is not the only one.
here another house. Every month 1 cases.
1 or 2 cases a month.
2 cases. Now they are hard to. Same thing in the.
So that's 1 or 2 cases a month of women who say they've been raped by the soldiers,
Yes.
who want to have an abortion.
Of the baby. Especially in the not in the JAFFNA area, especially in the Mullatiu and the climax, very backward areas.
In a new report, Human Rights Watch says it documented 75 rapes of men and women, mostly Tamil. It says evidence strongly suggests that this was done by members of the state security services. 62 of these assaults occurred after the war, some when they'd returned to the country after years away. But it's not only rape. The official has been documenting other current cases of abuse, he says, by the military and police. This man told him that army intelligence officers beat him with wire rope. He says another man was beaten so badly by police he needed surgery.
That is unforced. Inside the bowel is ruptured.
How many cases of torture and abuse do you get, say, per month since 2009?
More than 5 cases.
And these are people who've been tortured by the army and police?
Yeah.
And that's in this area
Yeah.
since 2009? It's hard to determine the exact number of people being abducted for this type of questioning, but we started to get an idea. In September, a school teacher went missing near this bus station. On November 15, a Tamil political activist also went missing. He's since been released. In both cases, relatives suspect the security services were involved, and there are more. Meeting those affected by the abductions isn't easy. Most are too afraid to speak or have been told not to. Even the people putting us in touch with these people don't want to show their identity because they're worried about reprisals by the authorities, and they say that threats are commonplace. But there is somebody here today who wants to tell us about her son, who was arrested just a few months ago. Her daughter has been missing since surrendering alive at the end of the war. Then in January this year, her eldest son, a father of 3, was arrested.
When he was on his way to Jaffna, he was drinking tea in the city. The soldiers surrounded him and put a pistol in his ear and in his mouth, blindfolded him, beat him, and put him in a van.
Inside prison, he got hold of a phone and told her what had happened. Police accused him of being a former Tamil fighter. She says he wasn't.
They kept him there and then took him to another prison and beat him there with a pipe. They pulled his fingernails out and tortured him. They said, "You were in the movement. Where did the movement bury the gold? Where did they bury all their belongings? Show it to us, and if you do, your beatings will decrease."
Police eventually told her he was being transferred to hospital. It was there she saw a terrible sight.
They took him there for a checkup because they didn't know if he had life-threatening injuries. 2 boys were helping him walk. Blood was pouring out of his feet. It was coming from his toenails.
Her son is still being held. We were told that across the north there are still 1 or 2 abductions every month. They often go missing from remote villages like this one. Here we met a woman whose husband went missing in 2011. He'd gone to meet an activist to try and find his missing brother.
They both went missing after the war was over. The government is saying the war is over, but they went missing after the war finished.
She says activists have filed a case against the army. While the army denies abducting anyone, she says a group of men recently warned her to withdraw the case.
They said I mustn't go to court. They said if I go to court, then my child will have to live without a mother as well as a father. So I didn't go to court. This happened last December.
She's now alone with her 14-year-old daughter.
If he was alive, then I wouldn't have to struggle by myself. He would look after our family. And my daughter can't live a minute without her father. She needs a father. When she sleeps at night, she will ask for her father and cry. I'm in a situation where I can't give her answers.
With the war finished, many question why Sri Lanka's security services might still be abducting people. This man's story may hold the key. He told the government official we'd met earlier that just a few weeks before he'd been abducted and beaten by army intelligence and police. What did they ask him? Why were they torturing him?
They asked why there's a number. They show the number, telephone number, and the photos. They asked the information from this person. You have the
Telephone numbers.
Telephone number, and some person communicate. This is the now is the military intelligence very carefully observe with our people who communicate with the foreign countries. And also
They're watching who's communicating, which Tamils are communicating with the foreign countries.
Very nice to meet you.
We wanted to find out if the army is indeed still focusing on Tamils with overseas contacts. Major General MAHINDA HATHURUSINGHE is the chief of JAFFNA Command.
Our problem is we have a serious diaspora and certain people who really want to see our country destabilized. So therefore, that threat we are fairly worried of. So therefore, that is one focus we are really looking at now.
One important thing that we're looking at is the continuation of what we're told are disappearances and abductions. Now, there's some very, very credible information that this is continuing. Are you still abducting suspects?
I flatly deny. I humbly say, none. We do not. We don't have anyone, and we don't abduct because there's no reason. Why should we abduct? We have no terrorism.
This is the mystery. I've spoken to a couple of people, though, that actually say that their relatives have been abducted. One was in January. and that person is now being held in a camp in the south of the country. The most recent one that I've heard of here was in September.
You know, I really can smile. Nothing else I can do, because this is politics. This is the problem in...
But these are relatives who say that they've got a relative in a camp. We've met them, I've spoken to them. These are people with very credible first-hand information.
Please tell them to come and meet me. We don't arrest anyone. That will be done by, if at all, is done by the police.
Well, they're not just relatives making it up. There are people missing. And not only that, I've met a woman who says that she was repeatedly sexually molested by military officers.
Where?
She doesn't want to say exactly where that happened. That was in this area.
I'm not trying to buy that.
So you don't. So it could have. I mean, this woman's account is chilling and upsetting. The fact that this happened.
So then, why shouldn't he have gone to police?
Well, because they don't believe the police and they're terrified.
No. This is,
They say that the military...
These are all easy answers. These are all easy answers saying that, don't believe army, don't believe police. Then whom they can trust?
Well, there was a recent Human Rights Watch report in Britain where they say they verified medically that people had been tortured, many of them who returned to the country in a peacetime. They'd been abducted by the police and military. They'd been tortured. Some of them have been raped, both men and women.
I suppose my smile tells the story. They're all fabricated, no base at all. They're all stories. Because they just want to stay in UK. They want to continue in other countries where they are. But these are all lies. These are all lies.
Back at Chogam, President Rajapaksa was again hit with questions on his government's treatment of Tamils during and after the war.
There is no killing at the moment.
He repeatedly insisted his government is investigating any potential abuses.
We have a legal system. We have a Human Rights Commission. And if anyone who wants to complain about a human rights violation in Sri Lanka, whether it is torture, whether it is rape, whether it is... We have a system. You all must respect the system of a country.
But outside the capital, across the country, those who work with detained Tamils disagree.
The judiciary is, well, they are just part of the government. The Human Rights Commission is part of the government. So there is no independent institution in this country.
This priest, who we can't identify, regularly visits detained Tamils in Central Province. He says he's tried to prosecute several security personnel accused of torture.
For the last 5 years, there wasn't a single torture case being filed against any perpetrator.
So no complaint of torture that you've lodged with the authorities has been investigated?
There's nothing to be done.
The priest says the tactics targeting Tamils suspected of being part of the Tigers, or LTTE, are now being used to curtail criticism of the government here in the Sinhalese south.
The human rights activists, the journalists, anybody who is saying the truth. I mean, this is the truth.
Critical of the government.
Yeah, critical of the government. They are being labeled as people who are supporting the LTTE and betrayal of the Sinhalese people.
And what happens to those people?
Most of them are now out of the country. So
why?
They were monitored, they were arrested, they were detained, and of course some are gone missing, disappeared.
The US-based Committee to Protect Journalists says since 2007, 23 journalists have fled Sri Lanka after what they felt was intense intimidation related to their work. 2 of the journalists who left recently worked for the Sunday Leader, a newspaper set up by Lal Vikranatunga and his brother Lasanta.
We decided to concentrate on corruption, non-adherence to good governance, and then human rights. The paper became very popular within a short period of time.
On January 8, 2009, Lasanta was travelling to work in the morning traffic when he noticed something strange.
4 motorcycles, 8 riders, they were dressed in black. They followed him from his home, barricaded his vehicle, put the motorcycles in front, broke the side window. They didn't use a gun. They used what is called a bolt gun, so that there is no spent bullet or any other evidence remaining. He was shot dead on his way to office.
No one has been tried for Lasanta's murder. Since then, Lal says journalists are less willing to criticise the government.
Some are abducted in white vans. Some are officially threatened quite openly. And some get anonymous letters written in blood or showing them as traitors. So that sentiment is complete. Nobody wants to risk it anymore.
Several days after Chogam, when the leaders and foreign media had gone home, we got a call to meet someone in a safe house.
Hi, SUNESH.
His name was Jude Sosai. He was known as SUNESH. During Chogam, he'd led this protest in the northern city of Jaffna. They were trying to get a petition to David Cameron seeking progress on the Tamil missing. SUNESH says he'd just received a phone call from a man identifying himself as police CID. It was 1:11 a.m. exactly. He knows this because he recorded the call. The caller was outside his house. SUNESH wasn't there, he was travelling, but his terrified wife and two small children were inside as the men banged on the front door. The caller then made a series of threats.
We gave you your first warning. After we forgave you, you've again done work like this. This should be the first and last time. This was your last chance. There will be no more mercy for you.
SUNESH says police refused to pursue his complaint, so he held a press conference to go public with the threat. But his decision to live in a series of safe houses for now comes at a high price, leaving his wife, baby, and 6-year-old son at home.
Even yesterday when I was departing, he was hugging me and didn't let me get into the car. I want to come with you. Take us with you, he told me. But I told him that I would return in 2 days. I couldn't even look into his eyes when I said that. That's how I came here.
Sorry, SUNESH. Okay.
Sri Lanka wants to regain its reputation as a major holiday destination, to market itself as a new haven of peace. But it's not a peace shared by all, especially many Tamils.
People today are living in the midst of fear. People are still being abducted. People are still disappearing. Human rights are being trampled upon. Rights are eroding. The government is keeping people in fear and is saying all these things don't happen.
Sri Lanka is under pressure to hold a credible inquiry into claims of war crimes against the Tamils. But it's not just questions about the last days of the war that need answering. The continuing use of what many say are abductions, rape and torture by a shadowy security service remain the biggest threats to people's security today.